The immediate aftermath of our plunge into the Thames was a disorienting blur of cold, exhaustion, and a desperate primal struggle for survival. The river, that great grimy artery of London, had been both our salvation and our tormentor, a frigid baptism that had washed away the immediate threat of Moran's bullets, but had left us in a state of near total depletion. We lay on the muddy southern bank, two wretched shivering figures, the distant sounds of the firefight at Blackwall Wharf, a faint fading echo across the water. My own state was one of profound misery. Every muscle in my body ached with a deep, burning fatigue. My clothes, heavy and sodden, clung to me like a second skin of ice. The foul, brackish taste of the river was still in my mouth, and a violent, uncontrollable shivering racked my frame. I was a physician, and I knew well the dangers of exposure. If we did not find warmth and shelter soon, our escape from Moran would be but a temporary reprieve, a prelude to a slower, more insidious death from pneumonia or fever. Holmes, though clearly suffering from the same physical distress, seemed to possess a reserve of inner fire, a mental fortitude that defied the weakness of his body. He had already pushed himself to a sitting position, his back against the slimy, moss-covered stones of the river wall. His face was pale and drawn in the faint, ghostly light of the distant city, but his eyes, those remarkable grey eyes, were alive with a fierce, unquenchable energy. The physical ordeal was, for him, merely an inconvenient prelude to the next crucial phase of the intellectual battle. "We must move, Watson," he said, his voice a hoarse, ragged whisper, yet laced with an iron thread of command. "To linger here is to invite disaster. Lestrade's men will be scouring the area, and Moran, if he has any sense, will have his own people watching the river. We are at this moment the most sought-after man in London." He struggled to his feet, his body swaying with a momentary dizziness, but he quickly steadied himself. He was a testament to the power of a singular, focused will, a mind that refused to surrender to the frailties of the flesh. His determination was infectious, a spark that ignited my own flagging reserves of strength. With a groan, I pushed myself up from the mud, my limbs protesting with every movement. "But where can we go, Holmes?" I asked, my teeth chattering uncontrollably. "We are in no fit state to return to Baker Street. We would be leading them right to our door." "Precisely," he agreed, his sharp mind already several steps ahead. "Our familiar haunts are no longer safe. We must become ghosts, Watson, and disappear into the very fabric of the city. We need a place to rest, to recover, and to plan our next move. And I know just the place." He spoke of a small, discreet hotel in a quiet, unassuming corner of Lambeth, a place he had used on previous occasions when the need for anonymity arose. It was, he explained, owned by a man who owed him a significant debt of gratitude, a man who knew how to be both discreet and incurious. The journey to this sanctuary was an ordeal in itself. We were two bedraggled, suspicious-looking figures, our clothes dripping, our faces streaked with mud. We moved through the back alleys and shadowed byways of the South Bank, avoiding the main thoroughfares and the curious glances of the few late-night travelers we encountered. Every uniformed constable we saw was a potential threat. Every passing cab a source of anxiety. Holmes navigated the labyrinthine streets with an unerring sense of direction, his knowledge of London's hidden geography proving to be as valuable as any of his other more celebrated skills. After what seemed like an eternity of shivering progress, we arrived at our destination, a small, unremarkable building tucked away on a quiet residential street. The hotel proprietor, a small balding man with nervous darting eyes, recognized Holmes at once. A look of alarm, followed by one of dawning comprehension, crossed his face. Without a word, he ushered us in through a side entrance and up a narrow, creaking staircase to a small, clean, and blessedly warm room at the back of the building. "Hot water, dry clothes, and a bottle of your best brandy, Miller," Holmes instructed, his voice still a hoarse whisper. "And no questions. We are not here. We were never here." The proprietor nodded, his expression a mixture of fear and a grudging, debt-fueled loyalty. He scurried off to do our bidding, and a short while later we were immersed in the life-giving warmth of a hot bath, the grime and the chill of the Thames slowly seeping from our weary bones. Wrapped in dry, if ill-fitting clothes provided by our host, and with a generous measure of brandy burning a welcome fire in our bellies, a semblance of normality began to return. The shivering subsided, and the deep, aching fatigue in my limbs was replaced by a more manageable weariness. Holmes, however, seemed to have shed his exhaustion along with his wet clothes. He sat in a worn armchair by the small, sputtering fire, a glass of brandy in one hand, a piece of hotel stationery, and a pencil in the other. The physical ordeal was over, and his mind, sharp and restless, was already fully engaged in the next stage of the campaign. "We have the advantage, Watson," he said, his voice regaining some of its familiar strength and resonance. "For the first time in this case, we are a step ahead of our adversary. Moran does not know that we have survived the river. He does not know that we have overheard his plans. He believes us to be, at best, out of commission, and at worst, at the bottom of the Thames. This gives us a brief but crucial window of opportunity." He began to sketch a rough map of the area around St. Giles' Rookery, the location of the abandoned chapel where Lord Vance was being held. It was one of the most notorious and dangerous slums in London, a maze of narrow, overcrowded streets and crumbling tenements, a place where the law was a foreign concept and violence was a way of life. "To attempt a rescue in such a place will be exceedingly difficult," he mused, his brow furrowed in concentration. "A direct assault by the police would be a bloodbath. The locals are fiercely territorial and deeply suspicious of any outside authority. They would side with Moran and his men before they would ever cooperate with the police. We would be walking into a hornet's nest." "So, what do you propose?" I asked, my own mind still too numb with exhaustion to formulate any coherent plan. "We must use the element of surprise," he replied, his eyes gleaming with the familiar intellectual fire. "We must strike before Moran expects us to, before he has had time to fortify his position. He believes he has until after the attack on Fairfield to deal with Vance. We will use that assumption against him." His plan, as it unfolded, was one of audacious simplicity. We wouldn't wait for Lestrade and the official police force. We would act alone, and we would act immediately. We would go to the chapel that very night, under the cover of the remaining darkness, and attempt to rescue Lord Vance ourselves. "It is a desperate gamble, Holmes," I said, my voice filled with a renewed sense of alarm. "We are in no fit state for another confrontation, and we would be walking into the heart of Moran's territory." "Desperate times call for desperate measures, my dear Watson," he countered, his voice firm and resolute. Our physical condition is a secondary concern. What matters is that we have the element of surprise. By the time Moran realizes we are still in the game, we will have already made our move. It is a risk, I grant you, but it is a risk that is outweighed by the potential reward. The life of Lord Vance, and the key to the utter destruction of Moran's entire conspiracy. He argued that to wait for the police would be to cede the advantage. It would give Moran time to learn of our survival, to move Vance to a new location, to disappear once more into the shadows. The moment was now, and it was a moment we could not afford to lose. His logic, as always, was compelling, his courage infectious. Despite my exhaustion, despite the deep instinctual fear that his plan engendered, I found myself nodding in agreement. I had come too far with him to turn back now. But before we could embark on this new and perilous paihassia of our adventure, we needed information. We needed to know the outcome of the firefight at the warehouse. We needed to know if Moran had been captured, if the Crimson Shadow had been dismantled. For this, Holmes turned to his own unofficial intelligence network, the Baker Street Irregulars. He dispatched a note via our hotel proprietor to a nearby cab stand, a known haunt of one of his young agents. The note contained a simple instruction: to gather any and all news of the events at Blackwall Wharf, and to report back to us with the utmost urgency. As we waited for the information to arrive, a new and disturbing thought began to trouble me. "Holmes," I said, my voice low, "our escape. It was almost too easy. Moran is a crack shot. He had us cornered, exposed. Why did he not simply pick us off on that ledge?" Holmes looked up from his map, his expression thoughtful. "An interesting question, Watson, and one that has been occupying my own thoughts. You are right. It is not like Moran to miss such an easy shot. He is a man who prides himself on his marksmanship." He paused, his eyes distant. I can only surmise one of two things. Either the fog and the darkness were more of a hindrance to him than we realized, or he did not want to kill us. "Not want to kill us," I echoed, astonished. "But he was firing at us." "Yes," Holmes agreed. "But was he firing to kill, or merely to frighten, to drive us off? Consider this, Watson. If we had been killed, our bodies would have been found. The police investigation would have intensified. The full resources of Scotland Yard would have been brought to bear on the case. But as two men who have simply disappeared, who are presumed to have drowned in the Thames, we are a closed case, a loose end that has been neatly tied up." The chilling logic of his words sank in. Moran had not been trying to kill us. He had been trying to erase us. He had herded us towards the river, knowing that it was our only escape route, and had allowed us to take it, confident that the cold, dark water would be our grave. "He is even more cunning than I had imagined," Holmes murmured, a note of grudging respect in his voice. "He does not just eliminate his enemies. He makes them disappear. It is a far cleaner, far more elegant solution." This new insight into the mind of our adversary made our own situation seem even more precarious. We were not just fighting a murderer. We were fighting a master of illusion, a man who could manipulate events to his own advantage with a terrifying skill. Our reflections were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. It was the proprietor, his face pale with a mixture of fear and excitement. he ushered in a small ragged street urchin, a boy of no more than 12, but with eyes that held the shrewd, world-weary wisdom of a man 3 times his age. It was Wiggins, the leader of the Baker Street Irregulars. The boy stood before Holmes, his small frame straight, his expression one of professional pride. He delivered his report in a clear, concise voice, a testament to the training Holmes had instilled in his young agents. The news from Blackwall Wharf was a mixed success. The police had, after a chaotic and violent struggle, managed to arrest most of the members of the Crimson Shadow. The society, as an organized force, had been broken. But the main prize had eluded them. "He got away, Mr. Holmes," Wiggins reported, his voice a mixture of disappointment and awe. "The colonel, he vanished in the fog like a ghost. 1 minute he was there, directing the fight, the next he was gone. The coppers, they're tearing their hair out. They've got the soldiers, but the general has escaped." Holmes listened intently, his face betraying no emotion. The news was both good and bad. The immediate threat of the Crimson Shadow had been neutralized, but Moran was still at large, a wounded and cornered animal, and therefore more dangerous than ever. "And what of Lord Vance?" Holmes asked, his voice low and urgent. "No sign of him, sir," Wiggins replied. "The coppers, they're searching the warehouse, but it's empty. They've got no idea where the old gent is." Holmes nodded, a grim satisfaction on his face. Our secret was still safe. The location of the chapel was a piece of information that we, and we alone, possessed. He dismissed Wiggins with a handful of coins and a word of praise, and the boy disappeared as silently as he had arrived. Holmes turned to me, his eyes burning with a renewed sense of purpose. "The time has come, Watson," he said, his voice ringing with a quiet, steely resolve. "Moran is on the run. He will be desperate. He will either go to ground, or he will move to eliminate the last remaining piece of evidence against him, Lord Vance. We must get to that chapel before he does." The daring escape was over, but it had only been a prelude to an even more daring rescue. We were 2 exhausted, battered men, armed with little more than our wits and a desperate courage, preparing to venture into one of the most dangerous corners of London, to confront one of the most dangerous men in Europe. The odds were overwhelmingly against us, but as I looked at the fierce, determined expression on my friend's face, I knew that we had no other choice. The game was not over. It had simply entered its final, most deadly stage.